The stadium was alive hours before the show even started. People had been gathering since the morning, forming long lines that wrapped around the building like colorful ribbons made of excitement. Everyone had come for the same reason: to see Michael Jackson perform live. It was one of those rare nights when the air itself felt different. You could almost feel the electricity, the soft buzz of something magical waiting to happen. The sky had turned a warm shade of gold as the sun began to set, creating a gentle glow over the massive crowd. Families, friends, and fans from all walks of life filled the seats. Some wore sparkling jackets. Some wore a single white glove. Many held posters high above their heads, and almost everyone had a story about how Michael Jackson's music had touched their life, stories of comfort, joy, inspiration, or childhood memories. For many of them, this concert was not just an event. It was a dream. Inside the stadium, the stage stood like a world of its own. It was huge, decorated with lights that seemed ready to dance the moment the music began. The giant screens on each side showed soft patterns as the sound crew prepared the final touches. Technicians walked quickly from one corner to another, checking wires, microphones, and the smooth black floor where Michael would soon glide, like only he could. Even they looked excited, smiling as they tested each part of the setup. As time moved closer to the start of the show, the sound of people talking blended into a warm ocean of voices. Laughter floated through the air. Fans practiced their favorite dance moves in the aisles. A child somewhere shouted, "I can't believe it, we're finally here." And several people around him laughed with shared joy. Even strangers were talking to each other like old friends. That's what Michael's music did. It brought people together. Then the stadium lights dimmed slightly, not completely, but just enough to let everyone know the moment was near. A wave of cheers rose instantly, as if the entire place shared one heartbeat. More people stood up now, holding their phones and cameras ready. Some closed their eyes to take in the feeling. Others shook with excitement. A few even wiped tears, overwhelmed by the idea of seeing their idol live. Backstage, Michael Jackson stood calmly, preparing in his quiet, focused way. He wore his iconic black sequined jacket and matching pants, polished shoes that shined under the soft backstage lighting. His famous white glove sparkled every time he moved his hand. Even though he was one of the biggest stars the world had ever known, he carried a gentle presence, soft-spoken, thoughtful, and focused entirely on giving the audience a night they would never forget. A member of the crew approached him. "Everything's ready," they said softly. Michael nodded with calm confidence. He didn't need long speeches or loud announcements. His preparation came from practice, discipline, and a deep love for performing. He closed his eyes for a moment and breathed in slowly, grounding himself before stepping into the bright world of the stage. Meanwhile, the crowd grew louder as the opening music began to play. It wasn't Billie Jean yet, just the warm-up track used to set the mood. But even this simple sound was enough to make the fans cheer like they were greeting an old friend. People began chanting his name, first softly, then louder still, until it felt like the whole stadium was shaking with anticipation. "Michael! Michael! Michael!" The chant echoed from every corner. Even those who couldn't find a perfect view of the stage shouted with the same excitement. The sound traveled upwards, bouncing off the stadium walls like waves of pure joy. Then, all at once, the lights went completely dark. Screams filled the air, happy, excited, explosive screams. People jumped out of their seats. Some covered their mouths in disbelief. Others stretched their arms into the air as if trying to catch the moment with their hands. A single spotlight turned on. It shined on the center of the stage. Michael Jackson stood there. He wasn't moving. He didn't need to. The power of his presence alone was enough to make 72,000 hearts beat faster. He wore his fedora tilted slightly forward, hiding part of his face, creating that perfect mystery he was known for. His figure stood tall and calm, under the glowing white beam. For a full 5 seconds, he didn't take a step. And yet the crowd screamed louder, as if holding back months or years of anticipation inside one single moment. People who had been sitting jumped to their feet. Some clapped, some whistled, some put their hands on their chest, already emotional. The sound of the crowd was so powerful that it felt like the ground itself vibrated. Then the gentle thump of the opening beat of Billie Jean echoed across the stadium. Thump. The crowd roared. Thump. People waved their lights and phones, creating thousands of tiny stars floating inside the stadium. Thump. Michael slowly lifted his head, just enough for the crowd to see his face under the shadow of the hat. They screamed even louder. When Michael began to move, it was like watching water flow. Smooth, effortless, and unbelievably precise. Every step he took matched the beat perfectly. The stage lit up in rhythm, creating a perfect dance of light and sound. His jacket shimmered, as though the lights themselves loved him. Even the air looked different around him, filled with the magic that happened only during his performances. Fans sang along with every lyric. They danced where they stood. They shouted each famous line as if they were part of the show. Some held their hearts, unable to believe they were witnessing the real Michael Jackson, performing the song that had changed music history forever. Even the security guards at the edge of the stage couldn't help but smile as they watched. Many of them had seen dozens of concerts, but there was something different about a Michael Jackson performance. It wasn't just entertainment, it was an experience, something that stayed with people long after the night ended. Michael moved across the stage with the grace of someone born to perform. His moonwalk glided across the floor so smoothly that people gasped every time he did it. The giant screen zoomed in on his feet, and the entire stadium cheered again. It didn't matter how many times fans had seen him perform it in videos. Seeing it live felt like witnessing a miracle. As the song built toward its peak, the energy of the crowd kept rising. People were jumping, singing, crying, shouting, and reaching their hands toward the stage as if Michael could hear each of them individually. The sound of 72,000 people moving together felt almost like a pulse. A living, breathing heart made of thousands of fans. And yet, through all the noise, all the excitement, and all the joy, something unexpected was about to happen. Something no one in the stadium predicted. Something that would turn this already unforgettable night into a moment that would be remembered around the world. Because Michael was not the only one on that stage anymore. But at that moment, right before the surprise, everything felt perfect. The music, the energy, the smiles, the lights, the connection between an artist and his fans. It was a moment frozen in time, beautifully balanced between magic and mystery, right before the night took a turn that would touch the hearts of everyone present. The music continued to pulse through the stadium, and the excitement kept building with every beat. Michael moved with perfect rhythm, his steps sharp yet smooth, his presence glowing under the lights. The audience was fully lost in the performance, focused on him and nothing else. It felt as if the entire world existed inside that one stadium, inside that one moment when art and emotion came together. But something unusual was happening at the far left side of the stage, a small movement that didn't belong to the show. At first, only a few people in the front rows noticed it. They blinked, unsure if they were seeing it correctly. Someone was climbing up from the edge of the platform. It wasn't a dancer, and it wasn't a member of the production crew. It was a fan. He looked young, maybe in his early 20s. His clothes were simple, not flashy, like the performers on stage. His expression was a mix of excitement and disbelief, as if he couldn't believe he had made it this far. His eyes were fixed on Michael, glowing with pure admiration. He didn't look angry or aggressive, he looked emotional, almost overwhelmed. The people who spotted him first gasped softly. Then more fans saw him. Then more. A ripple of surprise moved through the audience like a soft wave spreading in every direction. People nudged the person next to them, whispering, pointing, wondering what would happen. Even though the fans' movements were not frightening, it was surprising nobody expected anyone to get on stage, especially not during such an iconic moment. Security personnel at the side of the stage reacted immediately. They moved quickly but carefully, aware that thousands of eyes were watching them. They didn't want to cause a scene unless it was necessary. Their goal was simple: keep the concert safe, keep Michael safe, keep the fans safe. They gently stepped toward the young man, preparing to guide him away before he got too close. But the fan didn't stop. His steps were small and shaky, but he kept moving forward. His eyes were not on the security team, they were locked on Michael, who was still performing under the bright spotlight, unaware of how close the fan was now. The young man reached the center stage area just as Michael slid into one of his signature moves. When Michael turned, the fan froze, as if the sight of being face to face with his idol had stunned him completely. His hands trembled, his posture softened, and the emotion on his face was so sincere that even people far away could sense it. Security got even closer now, ready to gently take the fan by the arm. But then, something surprising happened. Michael noticed him. He wasn't startled. He didn't step back in fear. He didn't rush away or signal dramatically. Instead, he simply paused, just one steady, calm pause. His eyes softened. His expression stayed peaceful, almost gentle. He turned his full attention toward the fan, as if the music, the lights, and the entire crowd had faded into the background. This single moment made the audience go silent, not completely, but enough that the energy shifted. People leaned forward. They wanted to see what Michael would do. They wanted to see how this unexpected moment would unfold. The fan took a hesitant step toward Michael. His lips were parted slightly, as if he wanted to speak, but no words came out. His shoulders shook from emotion. His eyes began to fill with tears. It was clear he wasn't there to cause trouble. He was there because the moment had overwhelmed him so much that he had forgotten everything else. The rules, the boundaries, the stage. Michael sensed this instantly. His gentle nature showed in the way he remained calm, composed, and compassionate. With a small motion of his hand, he signaled security to wait, not to grab the fan, not to rush in. The fan dropped to his knees. Gasps filled the stadium. People didn't know how to react. Some held their hands over their mouths. Some whispered to their friends. Others simply watched in complete silence, their hearts beating fast with anticipation. The young man placed his hands over his face, overwhelmed by the emotional weight of meeting the person he admired more than anyone. He wasn't crying loudly, just softly, silently, with tears slipping through his fingers. His shoulders moved gently as he tried to breathe through the moment. Michael watched him with a kind expression. He didn't rush. He didn't show frustration. He didn't look uncomfortable. Instead, he quietly stepped closer, closing the space between them with calm grace. His movements were slow, steady, reassuring, like he wanted the fan to know he wasn't alone, and there was nothing to fear. Security stayed alert but respectful, standing a small distance away, observing Michael's body language. When he lifted his hands subtly toward them again, they understood he wanted space to handle the moment himself. They stepped back, allowing the quiet connection on stage to unfold naturally. The audience couldn't believe what they were seeing. Many of them had seen stories or interviews about Michael's gentle personality, but seeing it in real life, with thousands watching, was a different kind of feeling. It touched the heart. Michael bent slightly and reached out his hand toward the fan, offering silent comfort. The fan lifted his head, surprised but deeply moved. His tearful eyes met Michael's calm gaze. Slowly, almost as if he was afraid the moment might disappear, he reached toward Michael's offered hand. Their hands touched. The entire stadium erupted, not in chaos, but in emotional applause. People cheered, not because they were excited about the unexpected event, but because they were touched by the kindness Michael showed. Fans wiped tears from their own eyes. People hugged the person next to them. Some even stood with their hands on their chest, overwhelmed by the story unfolding in front of them. But even with all the noise, the moment felt strangely peaceful. A calmness filled the stage, as Michael gently helped the young man to his feet. The fan couldn't stop crying. His lips trembled, and he kept shaking his head as if trying to say he couldn't believe this was happening. Michael moved with patience. He placed a reassuring hand on the fan's back, offering silent support. He didn't scold him. He didn't rush him off stage. He simply acknowledged him with kindness, the way someone would comfort a friend who was overwhelmed. The fan tried to speak again, but his voice cracked in the middle of the first word. Instead of forcing a conversation, Michael gave him a small, understanding smile. He lightly squeezed the fan's hand as if to say, "It's okay. I understand." People watching from the seats felt their hearts swell at the gentle exchange. Many had come expecting an unforgettable performance, but they didn't expect to witness such a heartfelt moment that would stay with them forever. The music had softened while all this was happening, fading into the background to let the real story take center stage. The lights dimmed a little, creating a warm, glowing atmosphere around Michael and the fan, almost like the scene was wrapped in a soft halo. But even though the moment was beautiful, everyone knew something had to happen next. The show had to continue. The stage had to return to the performance. And the fan, as emotional as he was, couldn't stay there forever. This was the moment when the world held its breath, waiting to see how Michael would guide the moment from unexpected surprise to gentle resolution. Little did anyone know, what Michael did next would become one of the most unforgettable acts of kindness ever witnessed in a concert. The stadium seemed to hold a soft breath as Michael stood face to face with the emotional fan. The music faded into a quiet, almost tender hum, creating a space that felt calm even in the middle of thousands of people. Every eye in the crowd was locked on the stage. Nobody looked away. Nobody blinked for too long. It felt like time had slowed down just so everyone could fully see what was happening. The fan's hands were still shaking as he tried to steady himself. His breath came out uneven, his chest rising and falling too fast from the wave of emotion that had washed over him. Standing so close to someone he had admired for years made it difficult for him to even think straight. He felt small, touched, and grateful in a way he didn't know how to express. Michael could see how overwhelmed the young man was, and his response was simple but powerful. He offered a small, comforting smile. It wasn't a big smile. It wasn't dramatic. It was warm and gentle, the kind of expression that immediately made the heart feel lighter. The fan's eyes welled up again when he saw it. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Words weren't needed. Their silence felt full, meaningful, and respectful. It was a moment between two people who had never met before, but shared a connection through music, dreams, and admiration. People in the audience whispered quietly, but even their soft voices didn't break the atmosphere. Some said they had goosebumps. Some wiped their eyes. Some held their hands together like they were watching the most touching moment unfold right before them. Even those sitting far away could feel the sincerity of the moment. Michael slowly lifted his hand and placed it on the fan's shoulder, giving a gentle, steady touch. It was a gesture of comfort, reassurance, and understanding. The fan let out a small, breathy sound that was almost a quiet sob. He tried to speak again, but the words stuck in his throat. His emotions simply didn't let the words form. Michael leaned in slightly, close enough for the fan to hear him without microphones. What he said was soft, almost whispered. Nobody in the crowd could hear the specific words, but they didn't need to. They could see the kindness in his expression and the calm way the fan nodded afterward. The fan lifted his hands slightly, unsure of what to do, as if he wanted to hug Michael but didn't dare without permission. Michael understood this too. With respect and care, he gently opened his arms, not fully, but just enough to show that he didn't mind if the fan came closer. The fan stepped forward and carefully wrapped his arms around Michael in the softest way possible, like he was afraid of accidentally breaking the moment. The audience gasped, but not out of shock, out of emotion. It was rare to see such genuine warmth during a massive concert. It felt intimate, special, and almost sacred. Michael allowed the hug for a brief moment, giving the fan time to calm down. The fan's shoulders softened. His breathing slowed. And when Michael gently stepped back, the fan nodded gratefully, wiping his tears with the back of his hand. By now, the security team had moved a little closer again, but they still waited respectfully, watching for Michael's signal. They knew the moment was delicate. They knew the crowd was watching closely. And most importantly, they knew Michael's calm approach made everything feel safe and peaceful. When Michael sensed the fan was steady enough, he reached out and held the fan's hand. Slowly, he raised the young man's arm, lifting it into the air. The fan looked shocked, then deeply touched. He smiled through his tears, his whole face glowing with a mix of disbelief and happiness. The gesture was like Michael saying, "You're part of this moment too." The huge screens around the stadium zoomed in, showing the fan's tearful smile to all 72,000 people. The crowd reacted instantly. A powerful wave of applause swept through the stadium. People shouted supportive words. Some clapped with all their strength. Others cried quietly. Many simply stood there, hands over their hearts, taking in the beautiful moment. The atmosphere felt transformed. Moments earlier, everyone had been excited, dancing, and singing. Now the energy was softer, warmer, and more emotional. It was as if the entire crowd had become united by one simple, pure moment of kindness. The fan looked around the stadium in disbelief. Thousands of lights sparkled from phones held high. Thousands of faces were smiling back at him. The sound of applause wrapped around him like a warm blanket. He covered his mouth with his hand, overwhelmed again, but this time with gratitude rather than shock. Michael waited patiently, letting the fan take in the moment. He didn't rush him. He didn't signal to move forward. He allowed him the time to breathe, to absorb, to remember every second. It was rare for someone in Michael's position to share the stage in such an open-hearted way, and the fans admired him even more for it. When the applause softened, Michael slowly let go of the fan's hand. The young man nodded, understanding that the moment was coming to a gentle end. He didn't look disappointed. Instead, he looked fulfilled, as if a lifelong dream had just come true. Michael gave him one final gesture, a small tap on the arm and a genuine smile. It was a simple goodbye, but full of respect and kindness. The fan placed his hand on his chest, a silent sign of appreciation. His face was still wet with tears, but he was smiling widely, glowing with the kind of joy that only comes once in a lifetime. Security approached him now, but not with force. They placed gentle hands on his shoulders and guided him slowly toward the edge of the stage. The fan didn't resist. He kept looking back at Michael, who stood still, watching him with a calm expression. The connection between them remained until the fan was safely off the stage. When he finally stepped down, the crowd cheered again, this time celebrating the courage of the fan as much as the compassion of the star. People near the side of the stage reached out to touch his hand, hug him, or smile at him encouragingly. They knew he had just experienced something extraordinary. On stage, Michael took a small step back, letting the moment settle. The lights dimmed a bit, creating a peaceful pause before the music started again. He touched his heart lightly, acknowledging the emotion shared by everyone in the stadium. It was his gentle way of saying he appreciated the love, the energy, and the beautiful moment that had just unfolded. The crowd reacted with another wave of applause, louder than before. Not because of a dance move, not because of a high note, but because Michael had shown a side of himself that reminded everyone why they admired him not just as an artist, but as a person with a kind and generous heart. A soft glow filled the stage, and the music began to rise again, picking up from where it had paused. But even with the music returning, the atmosphere felt different, a little more emotional, a little more meaningful, and a lot more connected. People would talk about this moment for years. They would say it was one of the purest things they had ever seen. Some would say it was the moment that made them admire Michael even more. Some would say it was the moment that made the entire stadium tear up, and many would say that they had never seen kindness shine so brightly in the middle of such a huge performance. The night continued, the lights brightened again, and Michael prepared to step back into the rhythm of the show. But inside every heart in that stadium, the moment lived on soft, unforgettable, and filled with a beautiful sense of humanity. The music slowly returned as the fan was guided off the stage. But for a few moments, the atmosphere felt softer, calmer, and warmer than before. People were still wiping their eyes, still talking quietly about what they had just witnessed. It was rare to see something so touching during such a large performance. The moment felt like a gentle pause in the middle of a celebration, the kind of pause that made everyone appreciate the beauty of pure kindness. Michael took a small step back, looking out at the crowd with a peaceful expression. His gloved hand rested near his heart, as if he was acknowledging the emotional connection he had just shared with the young fan and the entire stadium. The fans responded instantly with another long wave of applause. It rolled through the seats like a comforting breeze, warm and filled with appreciation. Michael waited patiently for the sound to settle. He didn't rush. He didn't try to jump back into dancing too quickly. He understood that the audience needed a moment. And perhaps he did too. Even though he was a global superstar, he was still human. And the emotional moment had touched him as well. You could see it in his calm eyes, and in the quiet way he breathed as he looked across the sea of faces. After a soft pause, the familiar beat of Billie Jean returned, a little stronger this time. The lights brightened again, slowly rising from a warm glow to a vivid shine. People began cheering again, louder now, trying to shift the energy back into celebration while still holding on to the sweetness of what had happened. It felt like the perfect balance of joy and emotion. Michael lowered his fedora slightly and slipped back into character with a smooth move that made the audience shout with excitement. It was almost like watching a story unfold. One emotional chapter had just ended, and now a new one was beginning. He spun gently, slid across the floor, and hit every beat with a precision that reminded everyone why they loved watching him perform. But even as he resumed the choreography, there was something different about the way the audience watched him now. They weren't just looking at a performer. They were looking at someone who had shown, right before their eyes, the kind of gentle heart that made his music so meaningful. Every move he made felt deeper. Every step felt more special. The connection between him and the audience felt stronger than ever. Michael continued performing with incredible energy, mixing classic moves with small improvisations. His jacket sparkled under the spotlight, catching the light in a way that made him look almost unreal. Even from the highest seats, people could see the shine, the smoothness, and the magic in every moment. The crowd clapped in rhythm, sang along, and followed every motion he made. The energy began building again, slowly at first, then growing stronger with every second. But underneath it all, the emotional softness from the earlier moments stayed like a quiet heartbeat. Michael ended one section of the dance with a sharp stop. The lights flickered in perfect timing. The crowd erupted. But then, out of nowhere, something completely unexpected happened. Something so simple, and yet so powerful, that it touched the entire audience once more. Michael stepped to the front of the stage and looked out across the crowd. He wasn't dancing this time. He wasn't performing a rehearsed move. He simply stood there, letting the applause wash over him. Then he lifted his hand slowly and pressed it over his heart again, holding the pose for a few seconds. It was his way of sending love back to the people who had given him their energy, their support, and their emotion. The crowd responded with cheers that sounded almost like a giant, heartfelt thank you. Some people waved their arms. Some held up posters with shaking hands. Some reached forward, even though they knew they were too far away to touch him. And many people cried again, not out of sadness, but because the moment felt too beautiful to fully explain in words. Michael took a deep breath, lifted his head slightly, and gently gestured toward the part of the stage where the fan had been escorted off. It was a small gesture, but the audience understood instantly. He was acknowledging the young man again, honoring his courage and the emotional moment they had shared. The crowd cheered loudly in response, touched by Michael's sincerity. It wasn't just a performance anymore. It was an evening filled with genuine emotion, kindness, and unforgettable memories. As the lights shifted to a brighter color, the music picked up, and the concert slowly began to return to its full energy. Michael glided into the next set of dance steps, giving the crowd the show they had come for, but with a new layer of meaning added to every move. People danced in their seats, clapped along, and sang the lyrics louder than before. But something remarkable was happening in the audience too. People were sharing the emotional experience with each other. Strangers talked to strangers. Friends hugged one another. Families held hands. The entire stadium felt connected, not just through music, but through the shared kindness that had unfolded in front of their eyes. As the performance continued, Michael's energy seemed to grow. The earlier emotional moment didn't slow him down, it lifted him. He danced with more passion, more joy, and more connection. The stage lights followed him closely, painting soft shadows behind him as he moved. As the song approached its final section, the audience clapped in perfect rhythm. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't planned. It simply happened naturally, like thousands of hearts beating in harmony. Michael smiled softly, a small but glowing smile that the cameras quickly captured on the giant screens. The final note of Billie Jean hit the stadium like a spark. Michael ended the song with his classic, pose hat tilted, body still, hand lifted. The lights froze on him. The music stopped, and the crowd exploded into applause that felt almost like thunder. But once again, instead of quickly changing scenes or rushing into the next song, Michael used the moment to share something deeper. He bowed gently. Not just once, but twice, showing appreciation for everyone who had been part of the night so far: the fans, the crew, the young man who had stepped onto the stage, and even the energy of the moment itself. People shouted his name with renewed emotion. The stadium seemed to vibrate with excitement and gratitude. The moment felt almost magical, like something rare and priceless that would stay with everyone who witnessed it. Michael lifted his hat slightly in a gesture of respect, then looked toward the crowd with warm eyes. His expression held thankfulness, grace, and a quiet glow that made the entire stadium feel full of light. The audience cheered, many still emotional, knowing that they had experienced something far more meaningful than just a concert. They had witnessed a moment of genuine connection, one that would be remembered long after the music ended. The show wasn't over yet. There was still more music, more dancing, and more joy to come. But the atmosphere had changed. The kindness, the compassion, and the emotional moment had woven themselves into the fabric of the night, creating a performance that was unforgettable, not just for the sound and lights, but for the feeling it left in every heart. The echoes of applause were still floating through the air long after the song ended. Michael stood quietly for a few seconds, letting the warmth of the crowd settle around him like a gentle wave. Even after performing in front of millions of people throughout his life, this moment felt special. The kindness, the emotion, the connection, it all lingered in the atmosphere. It was as if the entire stadium had been wrapped in a soft blanket of shared feelings. Michael looked out over the sea of fans, each of them glowing with excitement and emotion. Some still wiped tears from their eyes, remembering the powerful moment they had witnessed earlier. Some smiled so widely their cheeks hurt. Others held their phones close to their chest, wanting to hold on to the feeling instead of just recording it. It wasn't just a concert anymore. It had transformed into something heartfelt, peaceful, and unforgettable. As the lights dimmed for a short break before the next part of the show, Michael stepped away from the center of the stage. The huge screens showed a soft pattern instead of bright colors. The music that played in the background was gentle, giving everyone a chance to breathe. It was a rare kind of quiet. The kind that makes a person reflect without even trying. Backstage, Michael took a deep breath. One of his crew members handed him a bottle of water. Another adjusted a small detail on his jacket. But even as they worked around him, the atmosphere backstage felt softer than usual. They had all seen what had happened. They had all felt the shift in the energy. And even though they were professionals who worked with him every day, they couldn't help but feel moved too. Michael smiled politely when someone said, "That was beautiful out there." He didn't respond with long words. He simply nodded with gratitude. The moment had touched him deeply. But he wasn't the type to boast about it or talk about it too much. His heart had guided him on that stage, and the fans' emotion had reminded him of how meaningful his music truly was to people. Meanwhile, in the audience, the young fan who had been brought off the stage sat in a safe, quiet area near the side, still shaking slightly from everything that had happened. He wasn't in trouble. He wasn't being scolded. The staff spoke to him gently, making sure he was calm and comfortable. One of them even gave him a cup of water and told him to take slow breaths. People nearby recognized him immediately. Some reached out to shake his hand, others hugged him, and many told him how lucky he was. His face was still red from crying, but he had a soft smile that wouldn't leave. He held on to every second of what had happened on stage, as if it were a precious memory he didn't want to let slip away. Back on stage, the lights began to brighten again. A soft drum beat echoed through the speakers, signaling the audience that the next part of the performance was about to start. People returned to their seats, though they still talked about the earlier moment, replaying it in their minds. Michael stepped onto the stage once more, and the crowd erupted in cheers again, louder than before. But this time, the cheers carried a different tone. They weren't just shouts of excitement. They were full of love, respect, and gratitude. People had seen his heart, and they were responding with their own. Michael continued the show with renewed energy. He performed several more songs, each one filled with passion and precision. His voice carried beautifully across the stadium, and his dance moves flowed like water. But even as he dazzled the crowd with his talent, the emotional moment from earlier continued shining in the background of the night. It was like a warm light that stayed steady even as the music changed. As the show reached its final section, Michael paused again and looked out over the audience. He didn't speak often during concerts, but when he did, people listened with complete attention. He stepped forward, gently lifted the microphone, and said softly, those two simple words filled the entire stadium with warmth. Fans cheered, clapped, and waved their hands. Some repeated the words back at him. Others simply listened, smiling or crying softly. Michael bowed his head for a moment, letting the applause wrap around him like a warm hug. He then performed his final song of the night, giving it everything he had. The lights danced across the stage. The music rose and fell like a beautiful wave. People sang along, many with their eyes closed, letting the melody flow through them. It felt like the perfect ending to a night filled with magic and emotion. When the last note faded into the air, the crowd exploded into applause again. Michael stood still, catching his breath, then slowly lifted his hand in a final wave. Fans responded with cheers that sounded like pure joy. It was a moment of celebration, love, and connection that seemed to stretch into infinity. As Michael walked off the stage, the lights dimmed softly, leaving behind a gentle glow. The entire stadium seemed to sigh with happiness. People were already saying to one another that they would never forget this night. Some said it was the best concert they had ever seen. Others said it changed the way they looked at kindness. Many talked about the young fan who had stepped on stage, amazed by how beautifully the moment had been handled. Outside the stadium, people didn't rush home. They walked slowly, still filled with the afterglow of the show. Some replayed the moment on their phones, where they had captured it. Others refreshed their memories by telling their friends every detail. The atmosphere outside was just as warm as inside, like a gentle continuation of the magic. The young fan walked out with a staff member beside him, still overwhelmed but grateful. Some fans recognized him and congratulated him again. He kept placing his hand over his heart, as if holding on to the feeling that Michael had given him. For him, it was not just a moment, it was a memory that would stay with him for the rest of his life. As for the thousands of people who had witnessed the event, they carried the memory home with them as well. They had come for music, for dance, for excitement, but they left with something more. They left with a reminder of kindness, patience, and the quiet power of understanding. They left with a story they would share for years. A story about how a global superstar responded with gentle grace instead of frustration. And for Michael, the night stayed close to his heart too. He had always loved his fans deeply. And moments like this reminded him why he gave so much of himself on stage. It wasn't just about the lights or the applause. It was about connection. It was about touching lives. It was about sharing a piece of his heart with every person who listened to his music. The story of that night spread far beyond the stadium. People who were not even there heard about it. Videos of the moment were shared again and again. People admired how calm, gentle, and understanding Michael had been. The story became more than a memory. It became a symbol of kindness. In a world where big shows often focused only on entertainment, this moment stood out as something different. It showed that even during massive events, human connection and compassion could shine brightly. It showed that a simple act of patience could touch thousands of hearts at once. And even years later, fans would say, "Do you remember that night? The night when a fan stepped onto the stage during Billie Jean, and Michael responded with kindness?" They always recalled it with soft smiles, warm hearts, and a feeling that some moments were too special to ever fade. It was not just a concert. It was not just a performance. It was a night filled with humanity, kindness, and a beautiful connection. One that made 72,000 people feel something deep and unforgettable.